Good morning, everybody. Big, happy day today. 7 o'clock. After spending just shy of 6 years detained in Iran, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe is back home, touching down in the early hours of this morning. The British government settled an historic debt with the Iranian administration, securing Nazanin's release, as well as that of fellow dual national Anoosheh Ashuri. We'll speak to the Foreign Office Minister James Cleverly, as well as Nazanin's friends and Anoosheh's MP during the course of the programme this morning. It's Thursday, the 17th of March, St Patrick's Day. Green Guinness everywhere. She's home. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe arrives back in the UK after a 6-year ordeal in Iran. A wave and a smile as she walked off the plane at RAF Bryce Norton, along with fellow detainee Anusha Ashuri, just after 1 o'clock this very morning. Nazanin reunited with her loved ones on British soil as her husband says it's time they can be a normal family once again.
Do I smell nice? I've been having a shower.
Nice for Daddy.
That's lovely. Do I smell nice? This was the moment a young girl got her parents back together again. In other news, no safe haven, fears for the well-being of hundreds in the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol after Russian forces bombed a theatre being used as a shelter. In the southern port city of Odessa, the streets are deserted as fears of a Russian attack grow. Chelsea goes through to the Champions League quarter-finals despite sanctions hanging over their club and current owner, Roman Abramovich.
I'm in love with your body.
And Ed Sheeran's copyright case continues, with music experts divided over whether Shape of You ripped off another song. Also ahead on the programme for you this morning, we're going to be speaking to the Ukrainian MP who's taken up arms and is fighting for his region in the south of the country. And a free house for refugees. We'll chat to the pub owner who's converting his hostelry into a home for Ukrainians needing a place to live. Morning, everybody. British Iranian nationals Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anoosheh Ashuri are safely back home in the UK. Their plane touched down at RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire at 8 minutes past 1 this morning. It ended several years of anguish and uncertainty as they were reunited with their families. Katie Barnfield watched their homecoming.
This is the moment they were dreaming of. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anusha Ashuri, both held for years in Iran, walking off the plane and on to British soil again. Finally, they are home and they are safe. At RAF Bryce Norton, where they landed, an emotional reunion with their families.
She just said, I don't understand what you were saying.
You get embarrassed when there's too much fun.
Nazanin with her husband Richard and cradling her daughter Gabriella.
Do I smell nice? I've been having a shower.
Nice for Daddy.
Together again, and this time for good.
I've met the families, they're safe and well, people are in very, very good spirits. I think it's been a really difficult 48 hours, the expectation that they would be released, but we weren't sure and right until the last minute. So it's been very emotional, but also a really happy moment for the families.
It was at exactly 8 minutes past 1 this morning that the plane carrying Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anoosheh Ashuri touched down here at RAF Bryce Norton. They spent an hour inside with their families behind closed doors, talking and hugging, before leaving to spend the night in government accommodation. It was a journey that finally gave them their freedom from an unimaginable ordeal. Nazanin's nightmare began in 2016, when she was detained by Iranian security services as she tried to leave the airport in Tehran after a holiday, their hidden cameras capturing her shock. Accused of spying against the Iranian regime, She was held for years on charges she always denied and subjected to what her husband Richard said amounted to torture. It was his years of relentless campaigning that helped to secure her release, including a hunger strike outside the Foreign Office. Persistence that finally paid off as joyous photos emerged of Nazanin and Anoosheh grinning on the plane that was to bring them home, their relief palpable. Now the nightmare is over. They can finally look forward to life with their families together again. Katie Barnfield, Sky News.
Joined by delighted Foreign Office Minister James Cleverly. My goodness me, good day at the office.
Yeah, a good day, a good day. And look, it's the culmination of a lot of work. I mean, people have been working on this for years, previous foreign secretaries, previous officials. But, yeah, yesterday was a really good day, a really good day.
You've been intimately involved in the negotiations for a very long time with your respective job. What have been the most challenging aspects?
Well, you know, for much of this, we found dealing with the Iranian government incredibly difficult. I think the change of government has definitely helped. The practicalities of the logistics of getting people home, the negotiations of getting Nazanin out on furlough. I mean, it was complicated at every stage. Of course, because of the huge number of sanctions, quite rightly applied to Iran, all these things become very, very tricky, very, very difficult. But ultimately, we never gave up. We continued working. We continued supporting the families, and I have to say, my admiration for the families of all those detained in Iran is enormous. And because of that continued teamwork, we managed to secure the release of 3 detainees, and obviously Nazanin and Anoosheh get to come home as well.
Why did we not pay our debt 20 years ago, as we were instructed to do by the International Court of Arbitration?
Well, one of the big problems, of course, is because of Iran's behaviour, because of things they have chosen to do, there are a huge number of international sanctions against them, and UK sanctions. So it is technically not easy. Now, we were able to come to an arrangement, the details of which I'm not allowed to discuss, they're confidential, whereby we can ensure that the money is for humanitarian purposes only, and that we've been able to do a deal which does fit within the international sanctions regime that's imposed against Iran.
Yeah, but I suppose the question remains, why did we not pay the debt before now? Given that we can pay it now and the sanctions are still in place, why didn't we pay it sooner?
Well, as I say, I can't go into the details of the agreement, but obviously there are always two parties, well, at least two parties to a negotiation. The previous Iranian regime proved very, very difficult to deal with, and some of the proposals that we had put forward in the past weren't accepted. The new government coming in did give us an opportunity to reset. The Foreign Secretary had the first face-to-face meetings with her opposite number in Iran for the first time in over 3 years. I had a face-to-face meeting with my opposite number in Iran, again, first time for many, many years. And I think that was part of a combination of things which enabled us to settle this.
So is it right to say, without going into any detail, that we had been trying to pay the debt for some time, but we'd come up against roadblocks?
We had been looking at ways to settle the debt that we conceded that we owed. We owed this debt, we accepted that debt. Obviously, the sanctions position made it incredibly difficult. You cannot just write a cheque. It doesn't work like that. Now, the details of how we have done it, of course, as I say, have to remain confidential. But it's taken a huge amount of work to come up with a method of ensuring that money is for humanitarian purposes and that it conforms to the sanctions regime.
That was my next question. How do we make sure that they don't use it for arms?
Well, as I say, the precise details of how we do this, I'm not allowed to discuss.
OK, let me ask you a different way. How confident are you that they will not be allowed to use it for arms?
So we have taken every precaution to make sure that this is used exclusively for humanitarian requirements. Iran does have a significant and meaningful humanitarian requirement. And as I say, we have taken precautions to ensure that.
And how do we make sure that future Brits have not put themselves in a more challenging position? Because some would say this can be seen as a ransom payment.
Well, look, we've always said these things were negotiated in parallel, but they were themselves separate. We owed this money. It was money that,
I
as you
understand
say,
that,
that we owed. So that was one set of negotiations about how we did that. But we have always said the arrest and incarceration of all those British dual nationals was unfair, it was wrong, it was completely unjustified. We've negotiated very hard for many, many years to get them home. We always tell people to pay close attention to the UK travel advice. I think dual nationals are particularly vulnerable in Iran because Iran does not recognise dual nationality. But we will keep working to secure the permanent release and return home of all those unfairly detained.
Yeah, but the release and the payment both came on the same day. So, you know, it's not such a great leap to think that, you know, it was a ransom payment.
Well, as I say, we have always made it clear that the money was owed. We recognise that, and we've been looking at ways of doing that. What connections the Iranian regime make is up to them. We have always been completely clear that the incarceration of British dual nationals was completely wrong, completely arbitrary, completely unfair, and it has always been in Iran's gift to release them. The charges against them were trumped up. We've always said this to be the case. Look, but we're just really, really clear. You see the images.
Yeah, no, of course, but it's purely coincidental that those two things happened on the same day.
As I've said, we have always made it clear that it is not linked, but the Iranians make the decisions that they make in response to the bilateral relationship. Settling this debt, the negotiations we've had with this new Iranian government have clearly been more fruitful, and I, for one, am just incredibly pleased that we're able to help families reunite.
OK, and was it medical supplies? How did we...
As I say, there's confidentiality.
OK, Morad, we were expecting Morad to be on the plane as well. Certainly that was the impression we were given yesterday by the Foreign Secretary. What's happened there? Well,
no, we were always trying to secure, as I say, the full and permanent release of all the British dual nationals, trying to get them all home. As the Foreign Secretary said in the House of Commons yesterday, Morad is a tri-national. He's got American citizenship as well. That has made it, in the eyes of the Iranians, more complicated, and they are obviously seeking to speak to the Americans about him as well. We have and we will continue to do everything we can to get him home as well, to his family.
You're confident he'll be coming home?
Well, look, it's always very tricky.
Because he's the only one of the three. He's the only one that was actually born in Britain.
I know he was born in Hammersmith. I've spoken with his family on a number of occasions. Sure. We are going to keep working to get him home, to get him properly and fully released. Well,
let's hope that is before too long. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia. Has there been any sort of breakthrough with the Prime Minister and the Saudis?
Well, look, the Prime Minister is looking to help alleviate the pressure that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has had on oil and gas prices. We'll have to see what the production levels that come out of the Middle East. The Prime Minister has a very influential relationship with a number of heads of state and heads of government in the Middle East, and I really hope that that production will step up to alleviate some of the pressure that we're seeing. But ultimately, the Prime Minister's right. The best way to protect ourselves against this kind of pressure in the future is to make sure we diversify our energy production, we move to renewable energy so we become less reliant on all oil and gas, particularly oil and gas coming out of Russia.
81 people killed on a single day over the weekend in Saudi Arabia. 3 more killed yesterday. We were told that the Prime Minister brought up human rights abuses when he was speaking to the Saudis. It used to be a region that you were particularly involved with, Middle East Minister, of course. What particular human rights abuses would you have wanted the Prime Minister to bring up with the Saudis? Well,
the UK has a long-standing and in-principle opposition to the death penalty. We bring that up when we speak with any country that has the death penalty. That would have been brought up by the Prime Minister? It would have been brought up with the Prime Minister. I brought it up when I was the Minister responsible for our relationship with the Middle East. I brought it up with those countries in the Middle East that retain the death penalty. And we do bring up human rights more generally. We defend human rights defenders in the Middle East, including in Saudi Arabia. And we do have regularly very frank conversations with them about this. We do, of course, need to maintain a strong working relationship with Saudi. It is a very significant and influential country in the region and in the Islamic world. But we do not hold back when we have conversations with the Saudis and others about these issues. What do we say to them about the way they treat women? Well, we have been critical about the role of women in Saudi society. I'm pleased to say, actually, that over the last few years there has been a huge liberalisation in the lives of women in Saudi Arabia. I've seen the change over the years that I've been visiting. We encourage them to keep that going. Women, are now...
I have to interrupt you there, Minister, if I may, because I did see a video the other day of I couldn't tweet it because it was just disgusting. A woman who had allegedly committed adultery. Officials chopped her head off as she was walking across the zebra crossing with her child.
I haven't seen that. I can't comment on that without saying.
No, but trust me, it illustrates how some women can be treated.
As I say, I'm very, very uncomfortable. I'm very uncomfortable passing comment on a video that I haven't seen, I don't know the provenance of. The simple fact is that the liberalisation of the role of women in Saudi has been pacey. We look to amplify that. We want that to continue. I've spoken and I've had dealings with senior women officials in the Saudi system. That wouldn't have been the case a number of years ago. We are, as I say, we are always going to bring up human rights issues when we speak with the Saudi.
Final thought about talking about human rights. Final thought with Ukraine before I let you go. It looks as though hundreds of people were sheltering in a theatre and direct hit, bombed. It looks as though they were targeted. That sounds to me like another war crime. Well,
look, we have seen obvious targeting of civilian infrastructure. That's against international humanitarian law. It's against the law of armed conflict. We've got to make sure that we capture evidence of all these incidents so that the Russian regime that's conducting this completely illegal, completely unjustified war in Ukraine are held accountable by the international courts once this is resolved. And we will keep applying pressure to choke off the funding to the Russian war machine to try and bring this war to a conclusion as quickly as possible. And we must conclude our interview there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, as always, Mr. Cleverly. Thank you. Let's have a quick look at what's happening as far as the front pages of the papers are concerned this morning. And one story, as you can imagine, is dominating. The Guardian leads with the story of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's release. The Telegraph quotes her husband's words to their young daughter, "Mummy really is coming home." The Mail does something similar with "Mummy's home at last." Now, the Times, she can start learning to be happy again, it says. Still to come on the programme for you this morning. The Shadow Culture Secretary, Lucy Powell, will be joining us to chat about the new online safety bill. Speaking to a military expert about why the Russian invasion of Ukraine has stalled. And later this hour, we'll hear what Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's release means to the comedian and friend of the Ratcliffe family, that's Chappie Khorsandi. Latest intelligence from the Ministry of Defence says the Russian invasion of Ukraine has largely stalled on all fronts. It comes after US President Joe Biden said Vladimir Putin was a war criminal. Let's take a look at some of the key developments for you this morning. The UK's MOD says Russian forces have made minimal progress on land, sea and air in recent days. Russian military have been accused of bombing a theatre in the besieged city of Mariupol, where hundreds of people were sheltering. The number of casualties has not yet been confirmed. At least one person has been killed, 3 others injured after the remains of a downed missile hit a residential building in Kiev. Ukraine's emergency services say the 16-storey building was struck just after 5 a.m. local time. And a 4th Russian general has been killed, according to Ukrainian officials. The 47-year-old Major General Oleg Mityav was reportedly killed during the storming of Mariupol. Nick Martin reports from Odessa.
Another sign of Russian aggression against civilians in Ukraine. A bombing of a theatre in the besieged city of Mariupol. The number of casualties is not yet known, but local officials say hundreds of people were sheltering there. These satellite images show the theatre a few days before the bombing. The Russian word for children spelt out on the ground. Russia's defence ministry has denied carrying out the attack. Following another day of violence, US President Joe Biden has for the first time called Russian leader Vladimir Putin a war criminal. Comments which the Kremlin has described as unacceptable and unforgivable.
Did you ask me whether I was called? Oh, I think he is a war criminal.
But peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are ongoing. The mayor of Melitopol, who was kidnapped by Russian forces last week, has been released, according to Ukrainian officials. They say it was part of an exchange that saw Ukraine agree to hand over 9 captured Russian soldiers. There is cautious optimism that progress is being made.
My priorities for the negotiations are absolutely clear. The end of the war, guarantees of security, sovereignty, restoration of territorial integrity, real guarantees for our country, real protection for our country.
But shells continue to fall on Ukrainian cities, and all people can do is hide. If the thought of cowering children doesn't stop the Russian bombardment, what will?
A very good question, and Nick is with us now in Odessa. Hi, Nick, good morning to you. Eerily quiet, I'm hearing there, as more and more people stay off the streets.
Yeah, generally, Kate, it is eerily quiet, except this morning there were a couple of loud explosions, loud enough to shake the windows of my hotel room. It's not clear really what that explosion was. It could be defensive fire, it could be something else, but we haven't heard any reports of any damage, but it was certainly an alarm call this morning. Apart from that, Odessa is quite a quiet place, just preparing itself as best it can. You know, overnight, further east from here is that story in Mariupol, which is causing a lot of concern. We know that the theatre there was being used as a shelter for around 100 people. It was then hit. We don't know the extent of the damage. We are still trying to figure out how many people have been injured or worse. And, you know, what's more heartbreaking about that is that the people there had, as I just mentioned briefly in that report, had written the word children in big letters on the ground. You know, what more of a desperate attempt can you have to try and appeal to your enemy's humanity than that? And yet, perhaps despite that, this theatre was still struck. And, you know, as soon as we can verify what on earth is going on there and who is injured, and hopefully nobody, then we can try and bring some clarity to that desperate situation. In the capital, Kyiv, overnight we know that a missile was brought down and that landed on a 16-storey apartment block. You know, the capital, just like it is here, is full of high-rise buildings. These are people's homes, and more people are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. So this morning, you know, worrying news from Mariupol. We'll try and bring more information about that group of 100 people taking shelter in a cinema that was bombed overnight.
OK, thanks, Nick. Keep safe. Thank you. The Chelsea manager, Thomas Tuchel, said his evening was ruined last night by reports the club may not be able to sell tickets for any future home Champions League games this season due to sanctions on the owner, Roman Abramovich. He was speaking after his team progressed to the quarter-final stage of the competition after victory in Lille. Here's Tom Parmenter.
Away at Lille, and what a time it is to follow Chelsea. Their club under attack and under threat. The Abramovich era delivered every piece of silverware to Stamford Bridge, but there are fans on this trip who are ready to move on and stop singing his name.
We all appreciate what he's done for the club, where he's lifted the club, but now it's time to let that go and move on.
You know, Chelsea fans are not the victims here, the Ukrainian people are, but I think that there is a sense of grievance among some fans because it feels a bit like, well, why have we turned a blind eye to so many other things?
I don't personally have a problem with the sanctions. I think they're the right thing to do in this moment. I hope it becomes a wider look at how the government look at money coming into England.
It's good possession this from Chelsea. It's a good ball as well in towards Pulisic.
With everything swirling around Chelsea, victory here in Lille in the Champions League was impressive. Thomas Tuchel is expertly guiding them through this crisis. But
those quarter-finals, the home leg, will have to be played behind closed doors because of a UEFA ruling tonight. You can't sell tickets, Chelsea, because of the EU sanctions.
Thanks for ruining my evening.
This club is still a highly prized asset, and this week there are all kinds of big money bidders circling for Chelsea Football Club. But at the same time, there are clear warnings that the way that football does business has to now change. Newcastle's Saudi takeover, approved by the Premier League last autumn, has certainly attracted more criticism than when Roman Abramovich took over at Chelsea 19 years ago.
We know that they want to get big money owners buying the Premier League clubs, but we're really concerned as an organisation that these opportunities just create the chance for regimes with terrible human rights records to use the sort of glitz, the glamour and the reflected glory of the Premier League to sports wash their reputations.
Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Lidl.
And looking at some of today's other headlines for you now, 4 people have died and nearly 100 have been injured after a powerful earthquake in Japan. The magnitude 7.4 quake struck shortly before midnight on Wednesday in the northeast of the country. Thousands of households are still without power. The government's plan for new laws on internet safety are to be brought before Parliament today, eventually. The measures require tech firms and social media platforms to protect users from harmful content, and the sector will be regulated by the media watchdog Ofcom. The footballer Paul Pogba has spoken of his worst nightmare after his house was burgled while he was playing for Manchester United on Tuesday. The French midfielder, whose children were asleep in their bedroom at the time of the break-in, was told the news just after their defeat to Atletico Madrid at Old Trafford. Well, music experts have been thinking out loud at a High Court trial to decide whether this Ed Sheeran hit has significant similarities to another song he's been accused of copying. It's this one we're talking about. It's a great song. I can lip-sync the whole way through that song. And I could listen to it all morning. Although it was never the same, was it, after, wasn't it, Marks and Spencer used it on their ad campaign, I think. Sheeran's 2017 track Shape of You has been accused of ripping off the song Oh Why by Sammy Chokri, but the forensic musicologist Anthony Rigliano has concluded in a report that it's objectively unlikely similarities between the two are a result of copying. However, another expert, Christian Siddle, found the melodies of both songs were too similar for this not to be considered. Ed Sheeran and his team deny any claim the song has been copied. I think I read this morning that he makes something like £2 million a year on the royalties from just that one song. You can see why they're fighting about it. Now to a couple from New Zealand who thought they'd dug up the world's largest potato, only to have their hopes crushed when they were told it wasn't a potato after all. See what you think. It might be a spud you like. Here it is, discovered by Colin Craig Brown and his wife Donna on their farm. Whew. Weighing in at 7.8 kilos, they nicknamed it Doug. It was crowned the king of potatoes. Perhaps Edward would have been better. Sadly, the couple were left russet-faced when the Guinness Book of Records ruled it was, in fact, a tuber, which is a type of gourd. So while they won't earn a wedge from their find, they won't hassle of putting it back into the ground. It's going to be tricky to peel, isn't it? Time for a quick look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Showery outbreaks in the north and west today, but it'll be much more settled from tomorrow. Ireland, Northern Ireland and Western Scotland windy now with widespread showers, some prolonged.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And looking at some of the pictures making the morning papers for you. Here we go. Let's start with the Eye. Has this picture of a leading WNBA basketball star, Brittany Griner, who was detained in Russia just before the invasion of Ukraine. Do you remember the paper reports that some US officials believe the two-time Olympic champion arrested on alleged drug charges is being used as a bargaining chip in the conflict. There she is in action. The Telegraph has a choice shot of a US submarine emerging through a large sheet of ice in the Arctic during a 3-week training exercise. Very impressive. The USS Illinois, pictured here, and the USS Pasadena are twin vessels being used to increase experience in the region. And the Mirror has an interesting picture here of a muddied jockey taken at the Cheltenham Festival. He looks very happy, doesn't he? As you can probably tell, perhaps a little bit relieved as well. Jockeys were greeted by a large deluge of mud after heavy rain fell on the second day. Ahead in the next half hour, I'm going to be speaking to a friend of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's family, the comedienne Shappi Kaur Sandhi. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News this Thursday morning. Happy news for you coming up. Russia's advances in Ukraine, first of all, though, they've largely stalled on all fronts. That according to the Ministry of Defence, with forces making little progress in recent days. New reforms have been promised by the government to stop Russian oligarchs using British courts to silence critics. And our top story this morning, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anusha Ashuri are back on UK soil after years of detention in Iran. Well, the Foreign Office Minister James Cleverly has been an intrinsic part of those negotiations for years. I asked him a little earlier why it took so long to repay a debt the UK owed to Iran for, oh goodness me, more than 40 years.
We had been looking at ways to settle the debt that we conceded that we owed. We owed this debt, we accepted that debt. Obviously, the sanctions position made it incredibly difficult. You cannot just write a cheque. It doesn't work like that. Now, the details of how we have done it, of course, as I say, have to remain confidential. But it's taken a huge amount of work to come up with a method of ensuring that money is for humanitarian purposes.
Well, we sent Emma to the Foreign Office for us this morning. Hi, Emma. A very good morning to you. Great news today, although there is one Brit still to come home.
Yes, that is Morad Tabaz. Now, when Liz Truss was appointed Foreign Secretary back in September of last year, she made it clear that her priority was to get all three released. And now, in the early hours of this morning, of course, those wonderful scenes of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anoosheh Ashuri arriving back. But Morad, he remains in Iran. He has been released from prison on furlough, but it means that he will have to go in and out of prison potentially, and he's not back on UK soil. So that's still a priority. But getting to this stage is the result of intense negotiations that have gone on behind the scenes, and this having gone back to the 1970s, a debt of close to £400 million, which has finally been paid. And as a result, we see Nazanin and Anoosheh back in Britain. And all along, Nazanin's husband, Richard Ratcliffe, said that he felt that they were being treated as pawns in a diplomatic crisis, having always denied the charges that they faced in Iran. But the question now is how to make sure that this never happens again. And Liz Truss has said that that is a priority.
OK, lovely. Thank you. Tamara's here. It's not often we can have happy news from the Minister first thing in the morning.
No, absolutely. And just those heartwarming pictures of Nazanin being reunited with Richard and her daughter at RAF Bryce Norton at 1 a.m. this morning.
You smell nice, Mummy.
I know. You can just imagine what kind of day they're having at home as they all get reacquainted. Absolutely lovely. And, of course, also joy for the family of Anoosheh Ashuri and his wife and children, who've also campaigned very hard for his release. So fantastic news for them. One dual national's not got out yet. The Foreign Office make clear they want to work very hard on that. And I think the questions starting to come out today about how it all came about, really nerve-shredding 24 hours for everyone involved. I'm told that even up to the last minutes yesterday, the Foreign Office, remember, wouldn't confirm it, even when it was reported on the ground that they were literally on the plane, because they knew up until that plane took off, there was a chance. At Bahrain airspace, there was a chance the whole deal could fall apart. So really, really nail-biting, obviously, for the families and for all the diplomats involved.
But the minister wouldn't tell us what they're going to do, how they're going to make sure that the money that's been paid, or however it's been paid, won't be used for arms.
That's right. So it was announced yesterday that the way they'd found to get around sanctions, Iran's been sanctioned for a long time. It was sanctioned by the EU in 2008, which is why the government say this payment wasn't made before, even though they acknowledge that the UK owed it. Then the collapse of the nuclear deal, and now it's sort of potentially back on the table. But Iran has been sanctioned by the UK on its own for the last 2 years. So they found a way around it where they say it has to be spent on humanitarian purposes. Exactly what the details of that are, they won't tell us, but it is clearly cash. And certainly there have been some sort of former diplomats saying it's going to be very difficult to make sure this is only spent on humanitarian purposes, but they won't give us the details. The key thing, though, they say, is that this new government in Iran, the new president who's been in place for about a year now, has been crucial in this reset. He really wanted to find a diplomatic solution to this, and clearly with some will on both sides, one has been found, but it may be that we never really know exactly what they've signed up to and what that money is used for. And the UK sanctioned Iran for human rights concerns and, of course, its nuclear activities.
Tomorrow's Take 9 o'clock.
See you then.
Looking forward to it. Thank you. Now, the UK's Ministry of Defence says the Russian invasion of Ukraine has largely stalled on all fronts, with forces having made minimal progression, land, sea or air, in recent days. Western intelligence has found that Russia continues to suffer heavy losses, with Ukrainian resistance remaining strong. Well, Mark Wojcik is a former special advisor for Russian and Eurasian affairs to the Commanding General of US Army Europe. He is with us now, as you can see. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Is it fair to say that the Russian invasion has stalled?
Yeah, good morning, Kay. Thank you for inviting me, and apologies for the dim light. I'm at one of the civil defense facilities here in the city of Lviv, Western Ukraine. And indeed, what was becoming obvious, really, from the very first days of the Russian invasion has now become a fact, namely that Russia launched an invasion based on a flawed strategic concept and major tactical deficiencies, and therefore its war machine is grinding to a halt. And really they've lost the initiative in a strategic and tactical sense in Ukraine.
We say that, and then they bomb a theatre where maybe 1,000 people were.
Yeah, this is a barbaric act, a major crime against humanity, which of course these acts will being collected. They're being there will be a international criminal court, of course, a decision on that hopefully sooner than later. But that also shows you the desperation of the Russian leadership. They're trying to terrorize the population. They're not even able to attack, the Ukrainian armed forces. They're really hitting soft targets. It's unjustified, unfair, barbaric, and it has to be punished and of course denounced by the entire civilized humanity.
Yeah, it looks as though President Putin's feelings have been hurt by President Biden, who called him a war criminal. Spokesperson for President Putin saying it was unacceptable and unforgivable rhetoric by the leader of a country from whom hundreds of thousands of people have died. What do you expect him to do next?
Well, Putin, first of all, has lost really all legitimacy in the eyes of the West. He's no longer President Putin. He's really the war criminal and the dictator of the Kremlin. And therefore, the only chance, for him to show any success to the Russian people through, of course, the massive propaganda, is to keep putting pressure on the Ukrainians. Of course, unfortunately, that means more and more civilians are going to be targeted. That's the only thing he can do. There would be strikes here and there against military facilities like the one in Lviv, but the Russians are running out of high precision guided munitions and high-tech ordnance, and therefore they're going to keep dumping dumb bombs, really old-fashioned style, Second World War style, and of course rocket launchers and the various artillery pieces. Really, this is they'll be terrorizing those neighborhoods and those cities until they're forced to give up.
How seriously, I should say, should we take the offer of peace talks from President Putin?
again, Putin did not invade Ukraine in order to sue for peace. He invaded Ukraine in order to really destroy its statehood, to force it to surrender to Russia's terms, to deprive it of its sovereignty, of its foreign policy orientation, of its territorial integrity. I mean, this is clearly stated during every single round of the negotiations. And therefore, I would not take Putin seriously. Any negotiations for Russia are just temporary respite in a continuous hybrid warfare against Ukraine and the West, by the way, and NATO. And therefore, he should not be trusted at all. Only pressure and strength is what Putin and the Russian leadership understand.
Some Chechens have, we believe, turned to helping their former Russian foes in Kiev. But the big prize for President Putin would be if China agrees to help with weapons and the like. Where do you think we are with that?
I think China is majorly displeased with the way the war is going. There's no doubt that Putin had promised to President Xi during a meeting before the Olympics that the war would be over in a couple of days, and this was the only way he could have, I guess, gotten the blessing of China to proceed in a way. Let's not forget the Belt and Road Initiative. This multi-billion or hundreds of $billion project worth of China. I mean, most of the communication lines goes through Russia. Now everything is tolled. I mean, so this is actually hurting China's strategic commercial plans for Eurasia and its global expansion. So China cannot be happy with what's happening. The U.S. has issued warnings, of course, to Chinese officials not to help Russia. I couldn't rule out any clandestine help or any ways of helping Russia kind of behind the scenes, but an open help will definitely hurt China's interests strategically.
OK. Do please keep safe. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
Let's return to happy news, should we, and the news that Nazanin, Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anoosheh Ashuri are both back home safe. This morning, they were reunited with their families just after 1 o'clock this morning at RAF Bryce Norton. Well, British-Iranian citizen Natasha Phillips is with us now. Hello to you, Natasha. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you thought about what you saw this morning.
I'm half Iranian. My mother is Persian and my father is English. And of course, like I think the majority of people in the country, I'm thrilled for Anoosheh's family and Nazanin's family in particular, for Elika and Gabriella to have their parents home. It's wonderful news, and I think it's news that we've all been waiting a long time for.
Indeed so. That's certainly true. And there have been so many false dawns, haven't there? Where are you when you thinking about whether you wanted to travel back to Iran or not at the moment, given that this deal has now been done and potentially, I suppose you could take from it, that it is now safe for Brits to travel, dual nationals to travel to and fro?
I think that may depend entirely on whether the interest that's owed on that debt has been addressed in any deal that may have been made in the last 48 hours or so. There is still an outstanding debt of more than 120 million in terms of interest on that lump sum if it hasn't been addressed in any deal. And so tensions may still be high. The Iranian government may still be thinking about that as their next focal point. And individuals like Murad Tabaz, who have been placed on furlough, may well be the next form of leverage the Iranian government will use to try and incentivize the British government to settle any outstanding interest owed on that sum. And as we've seen in the past from bitter experience with the regime, they don't place individuals on furlough as a gesture of goodwill. This is more of a form of incentivization in order to get the British government to act. So I think if you're thinking about traveling to Iran, it may be worth considering all of those things and deciding whether there is still a risk and whether you do really need to travel. I think for myself as a human rights reporter who's been focusing on human rights violations in Iran for the last 6 years, and for my team members at Kayhan Life, which is the newspaper I work at, focusing on Iranian foreign affairs, we'd probably have to think very carefully about traveling to Iran at this point, particularly as the outlet has been very critical of the regime's human rights violations and the ongoing significant levels of corruption within the government and the regime. So I'd say it's a decision people should make very carefully, and I hope that the Home Office and the British government will release guidance in the next day or so outlining the risks so that people can make informed decisions about travelling to Iran.
And why do you think, I wonder why you think that they were released now?
My thought is that that is more to do with a nuclear deal and a sense of pragmatism rather than any altruistic gesture on the British government's part. The Iran nuclear deal has been stalling now for several months. There's been huge frustration on both sides. And I think the settlement of the debt removes some of the white noise that the Iranian government may have been creating around the nuclear deal negotiations in Vienna to try and push the British government to make key concessions that they may have wanted. It also removes the moral high ground from the Iranian government, who may have taken the view that they're not going to give any concessions that any of the parties to the deal want if they're not going to be getting what they're owed. So I think in that respect, it may have been a practical move rather than an altruistic one.
OK, it's great to talk to you. Happy news, whatever the reason at this stage. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, joining us now is Shapara Khorsandi, a comedian and a good friend of the Ratcliffe family. Hi, it's good to see you. How are they? Have you spoken to them?
Oh, I'm leaving them alone for a little bit. I think we've been all my family and our friends and supporters of them have been so wrapped up in their story that I've been waiting. I said to Richard a while back that I'm waiting for the time where I leave you alone. Because I think that's what they need at the moment, just to, I don't know. And I can't wait to speak to them, but I think right now I'm going to give them a couple of days to just stare at each other and hold each other.
Reacquaint each other. And Richard to make that promised cup of tea that we were hearing so much about yesterday. This is a great picture of them being reunited. Did you see the moving pictures of them being reunited at the airport this morning?
I mean, it was beyond. I mean, it's like a dream. I can't articulate what it feels like right now. It's been a dream, particularly as it's Iranian New Year, starting on Sunday, Monday for 13 days. And that's around the time when she was taken. So as the new year approached again, I felt bleak. And I didn't even, I just thought I should call Richard, but I just thought it's so sad if there's no news. And then when it happened, I phoned my brother in Rome yesterday. Poor man. He still can't talk to me. I don't think he stopped crying because my brother was the first person to tell me about all this because Nazanin was a Facebook friend of his. And he was saying to me that, I've met this guy Richard and his wife in Iran's been taken away. And at the time, this is back in 2016, I said, Pave, it's Iran. They do this all the time. She'll be out in a couple of weeks. Don't upset yourself. And that was my thinking because, you know, we Iranians are, it's not new, this kind of outrageousness from the Iranian government. I mean, it's why I live in London and why I'm in exile. But and as time went on, it was clear that this wasn't one of those situations where they were just playing a little game with someone. This went on. And then I met Richard. So this would have been about 6 years ago now. And I just remember him saying to me, when I said to him, you can speak to your daughter on Zoom, or on not Zoom back then, what was it? FaceTime.
FaceTime,
Yeah, and he said, well, and he's such a calm man. And he said, well, she's forgetting her English. And that really, that simple little fact really broke me because, you know, to know that your child has forgotten the language that you loved them in, and that there were thousands of little moments like that throughout this 6 years that just chip away at your heart, and now they're back together again. I can't quite put into words what it is. It feels like life can go on now for everyone, because until Nazanin was home, I think anyone who knew them or campaigned for them and was very empathetic, it was just this dark backdrop, and just seeing her, I'm just watching now her coming down those stairs with Anoosheh, and I'm so happy for them all. And just
you're a passionate lot, aren't you? You Iranians, dual nationals. Talk to me, if you would, please, about we were hearing a lot about the new leader and how it was because of his election that this potential deal has been made possible. What's your view on him?
I think that how this deal was made possible and why now and all of that will be discussed in weeks and actually probably years to come. I don't think we can know completely why this happened now, or it was because of a change in regime or this and that, and it all seems so complicated, and frankly a lot of it is so insidious to look at that I think that's right now I just want to sit with we are very passionate. There's Iranians love two things: passions and tea. So they are, and all of the analysis of it I think is going to be very interesting, and I am being very positive about everyone right now, but just you wait, Kay, just you wait. I'll have some things to say about certain people.
Oh,
when everyone's a bit.
You come and tell us whenever you fancy. Obviously, it's a breakfast show, so keep it, more or less down the middle. As you were saying, it's the Persian New Year this weekend. I suppose that would be quite a good time for you to get together with the family, wouldn't it?
It is, yes. It's Iranian New Year. I'm working, as ever, on Iranian New Year. There we are. But it is a time for family, and it's a time where we go and visit everyone. So I'd like to wish all of your viewers who are Iranian, Nowruz Piruz, Eid Shema Mubarak.
Well, what does that mean?
It means Happy New Year, and Piruz means jubilation and victory.
Oh, OK. I'm going to practice that. Tell me again. Do it slowly.
Nowruz.
Nowruz?
Nowruz means new day, new year. Piruz.
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 OK. Nowruz Piruz.
Yeah, Piruz is a beautiful word. It's a mixture of sort of success and victory.
Nowruz Piruz.
Yeah.
Close enough, huh? Yeah. OK. Fantastic. And your excitement about it all is absolutely intoxicating. Honestly, it's such a wonderful day, isn't it, for the family?
Phone, I'm like, don't ring Richard. Leave him alone. Don't wake them up. Leave them alone.
Exactly. Well, when you do see them, do pass on our congratulations as well. We've felt it with Richard as he's gone along with his. Those twice, I think he was on hunger strike, wasn't he? And he's battled on. He is, without question. He's set the bar so high for husbands everywhere. So I'm thrilled.
I had a conversation with my partner last night. So if it happened to me, how long would you campaign for? And it turned into a weird little argument, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of families are having those discussions as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the programme this morning. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you.
Likewise, bye.
Thank you, bye-bye. Yep, a happy day after so much sorrow over the last few weeks. We have all the latest as Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anoosheh Ashuri are back in the UK after years of detention in Iran. Not forgetting, of course, Morad Tabaz, a dual national who is still in Iran.